I was so proud. That was such an amazing moment, because also I took my kids to the Louvre and we were walking around and I said, Mommy sold this painting. And I really feel like I was part of that. And it's great to be able to see a painting that you've sold in a museum, because you think this is going to last through time, like years and years and generations to come. It's nice to say, oh, I played a little role in that.
I'm Karine, and this is The Seat of the Muse, a show I started out of love for meaningful conversations and a curiosity about the stories behind what people do. Each episode is an invitation to sit down, slow down, and listen in, because sometimes a single story can shift how we view our own. This is a space for the stories we don't always hear, the ones behind the titles, the passions, the quiet turning points, and the worlds hidden in plain sight. Now let's get into today's episode.
Hi, Katia.
Hi, Karine.
Thank you so much for being here on Seat of the Muse podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And so before starting any session, I like to ask my guest one question. Imagine we're doing this in front of an audience. Who is one person you would want sitting in the front row, and why?
I would say one person or two. Can I have both my kids? Because then the other one will be jealous. So I would say my daughter Talia, just because I see in her eyes how she looks at me being a young mother who works and who actually raises a family and takes care of everything. And I know that she looks up to me as like her idol. So for me, it would be definitely looking at her and showing her that, one can do everything.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. And so your role as Sotheby's is a dream for many. But I'm curious to know for someone who holds a bachelor's degree in French literature, how do you find your way in the art world?
Well, it was an interesting journey, and I have to say it was a different time. I joined Sotheby's in 2008 before the crash. So that was a very different time today, because getting a job even in those days was a lot more, I would say, straightforward. It was easier process. It wasn't as difficult before the crash, obviously. So I was lucky enough to study what I was interested in and something I was good at. But I always loved French literature, but it wasn't, by no means, it was something I knew I would follow a career in. I landed in art when I graduated just because I had a cousin who was working at Sotheby's in an auction house in contemporary department. And she told me, you finished university now, why don't you come to Sotheby's and I'll help you get an interview. So I had my first interview and I was lucky enough to be asked to join a team that was being built at the time, which was the private client group. And the private client group was a really interesting department within Sotheby's. It wasn't a department that was focused on art specifically or luxury. It was a department focused on clients, and it was the most important clients had different contacts that they needed to have a point of contact at Sotheby's. So we were divided up by region. So we had the Eastern Europeans that were looking after the country head, and then there was Europe, like France and Italy, and then there was Asia, there was the Middle East, and the Middle East was what was missing. So I took on that role, and I was lucky enough to be able to join at that time because I didn't have to go through the process of doing internships and graduate trainee programs, and it wasn't as difficult back then. So that's how I started.
That helps.
Yeah,
okay,
it
great.
helps big time.
Yeah. And did you learn along the way, the art world?
Of course. I mean, that was, I would say, the best education is learning on the job, and being surrounded by so many specialists in different fields is what was the best education for me. I learned from the mouth of the passionate specialists, whether it be old master paintings or Islamic art or Impressionist art, which is my favorite, contemporary art, and then also the jewelry sales. So we had this amazing thing back then in London is all the art specialists, whenever there was an auction coming up, they would come together and they would invite all the relationship managers and the client-facing people like myself to listen to a tour, to do a tour, walk around with the specialist and go through each artwork or each item to explain why it was so important, why we should concentrate our clients on this specific piece. And it was like a great learning experience because we would literally be standing in front of the painting and hearing about it and hearing why the artist is, so it was such a good era for the artist, or why this is such a good series, or what makes it unique, what makes it important. And that is how you learn, I think, and better than reading any books or taking any art courses. Of course, I'm not saying an art course doesn't teach you, but I think this is a funner, faster, more efficient way of learning on the go. And I became a generalist. I was not a specialist in one field. I started learning a little bit about every field, which is great in a way because it's very enriching to learn a little bit about everything. So my general knowledge, I would say, is become better and better over the years from being with my colleague.
Yeah, no, definitely. I can imagine that. And so, you said it was easier than it is now. And now people kind of see the art world as a bit intimidating and, exclusive. So how would you advise, young people nowadays looking to break into that world? Like, how do they go about it?
To join in a professional way or to start, buying art?
In a professional way.
I would say for sure, education is important. So one needs to learn, being self-taught. If you have a specific field that you're interested in, try to become as educated as you can. Ask questions, go to the galleries, do courses. These online courses that they offer now are amazing. This is a good foundation to start with, and the curiosity and the level of knowledge that you can build through reading and through studying whatever field you're interested in. That's a good place to start. And then not to be afraid of walking into, the auction houses, Christie's and Phillips and Sotheby's. We all have an open door policy. It's open to the public. So any office that you have or any gallery that you have, you can walk into and you can have a walk around and look around and ask questions. So it is a little bit intimidating at first because one thinks, I can't walk into an auction house. I'm not an art collector. I'm not buying anything. But actually, no, it's in a way, it's like a museum. We're open to the public. Anyone can come in and have a look and ask questions. There are always people around. So I would suggest coming in, looking at a catalog, walking around, getting to know, to see what are the art pieces that are selling in the auctions, have a look at the online catalog, the websites, just kind of get familiar with it. And then you also build relationships through your network of art people. So when you walk into galleries and when you walk into auction houses, it's good to get to know the people who are actually working there. The girl at the reception desk, little by little, and then you can be open to opportunities that come up. And obviously nowadays you can be online and see everything, all the jobs that come up. But I think first foundation is education and curiosity and building that knowledge.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's great advice. And I hope, some people who listen to this kind of relate and start kind of doing that as well. For me, anyway, I thought, because I live in London and I thought that you can't really enter, the Sotheby's office just like that and come see any auction. And so for people like in general, when they hear Sotheby's, they hear auction house. But there are so many more roles within, especially, for example, yours. Did you at any point consider exploring other avenues, or how did you know you had found the right fit within?
Yeah, I knew I was in the right field, and I was actually lucky to not have to move around in different departments and know from the get-go that this is where I needed to be. I'm on the client-facing side of the business. I knew that was more what I was interested in doing. Actually, I had a boss in 2010 that tried to study the Middle Eastern art market and become a Middle Eastern art specialist. And although I was very happy to work with the team, the specialists, and help them sell the sale and help them attract buyers for this specific field, I knew I wasn't a good art specialist. And when you know you're not good at something, you don't want to do it because it wasn't what I was passionate about. I was on the other side of it. I really wanted to attract people. I wanted to get people to come through the galleries. I wanted to sell the paintings. I wanted to organize events. I wanted to generate a younger collector base. So I wanted to contact all the sons and daughters at the time. This was in my early 20s. I was really excited about organizing really good young collector events where we would sit in the galleries and we would do like a talk on all the artists, and it would become educational and dynamic. I would organize art quizzes, which was really fun because it would make people like get excited and get into it. And then everyone would want to come to the auction because they would feel like they were part of this like group and this elite group. And it was a fun time for me to be involved in that. But I knew that was the side of the business I wanted to be on. I was more on the social PR client-facing side, much more than the specialist side. So I even got offered to move to New York to do a stint at becoming an art. They really wanted me to become an art specialist, and I held back. I said, I'm sorry, this isn't for me. So I really stuck. I stayed true to what I knew I was good at and what I felt passionate about. And I think I did do it justice. So I think I made the right choice by turning down what they wanted to do for me at the time. And I held back and I said, no, this is the area I want to stay in.
Yeah, I think that's great because you recognize your own strengths.
For sure.
So you'll know where you're going to be better.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so you started your career in London,
Yeah.
but here we are, talking together in Dubai.
Yeah.
So how did that career move happen, if you can take me through that?
It's been a long journey now. To take you back, I've been with Sotheby's for 17 years, which is which is a long time to be in one company. And it's actually all I've ever known. So I'm a very loyal employee. So I started in 2008 in London in the private client group, like I mentioned, focusing on the young generation and the Middle Eastern clients. That was the starting point in my career. I ended my stint in London in 2015 when I moved to Dubai just as I got married for personal reasons. I got married to moved to Dubai, and I was actually very sad because I thought, oh, this is the end of my career. I'm going to move to Dubai. Sotheby's doesn't have an office in Dubai. Christie's has had an office in Dubai, but not Sotheby's. So it was bittersweet because I thought, okay, this is the end of my career and I'm going to start my new life of being a housewife and a mother and move to a new place. It's going to be different, but make the best of it. And maybe I'll find a job while I'm there. So I moved to Dubai, and then I told my management at the time and HR team, I'm sorry, I'm moving to Dubai. I have to leave Sotheby's. And they said, hold on, we're working on something. Just hold on a minute. So I held on for 6 months. I was great. It was great because I moved to Dubai. Meanwhile, I had a wedding. I got on with it, and I was still technically a full-time employee. But I didn't have an office, and I didn't have an idea what was going to happen. So I moved to Dubai 6 months in, and the whole team of management came to Dubai for a week and met with me, and they said, we would like you to open Sotheby's in the Middle East, in Dubai. I said, what, really? And at the time I was, I'd been at Sotheby's for 7 years. I had just gotten married. As I said, I just moved to Dubai, as I said, and I was 28. So pretty young to open an office and to have that pressure on my shoulders. It was a little bit daunting, but it was exciting, obviously. And I thought, this is an incredible opportunity to be able to open up. It's like a startup, but with one of the oldest brands in the world. It's a 300 and however many year company. We were established in 1744. So you can imagine this is such an old brand, and it's a recognizable brand. I mean, I knew that in Dubai, not everyone knew what Sotheby's was, but it was still nevertheless a very strong brand. To open that in Dubai, and at this stage of my life, I thought it's going to go two ways. It's going to go either really well or it's going to be a disaster. And I remember soon enough, I took the role, but I found out I was pregnant. That was hurdle number one. Doesn't matter. I kept going. Luckily enough, it took a year for me to get the office opened and hire a small team and get it all going. And then, funnily enough, I got pregnant again. So at this point, 2 children, one baby and one on the way. And I was 3 months before opening the office. So to put it in perspective, I had a 9-month-old baby or a 1-year-old baby at home, and I gave birth in December, and March was the day I was going to open Sotheby's. So it was a lot to take on. I was in a moment of panic, but I have to say, I always give credit to my husband. He told me, you should just do it and try it. And if it doesn't work out, you just tell them, I'm sorry, I can't do it anymore. So taking that pressure off of me was very helpful at the time. If the reverse psychology works, because if they had told me you need to make it work, I would have felt overwhelmed. But I think I talked myself into it and thought, you know what, I'll just give it a go, and maybe this is going to be an amazing story for me. And obviously, I come from a family that don't work. The women in my family don't work. So I was like, this is going to be setting a new precedent. And I'd be really proud to show my daughter that, you can do it all. And I was lucky enough to live in Dubai where we have the means to be able to have help and have, nurseries and all of the help that I could get, the care that I could get. And believe me, I had it all. I'm a queen delegation now. I can delegate everything, but I managed to multitask. And of course, there was a lot of mom guilt. And when there was not mom guilt, there was, work guilt. So I felt like I couldn't be in so many places at one time. But somehow, and with the help of the team, of the 2 people I hired, Yasmin and Noha, who were amazing, we managed to open Sotheby's. And it's now going to be our 8th year, I think. We opened in 2017, yeah. So if I do the math correctly, in March, Sotheby's and minority stake has just been acquired by Abu Dhabi, by ADQ. So we've got even more of a bigger print in the UAE. So our business is growing. So the Middle East is really a growth area for us. And I think it's amazing to think that it all started in 2015 when I moved here. Really it all started there, because I don't know, if I hadn't moved here, maybe, at some point someone else would have done it. But I'm very happy that this was part of my story, and this was part of me kicking it off. And not to say that anyone else couldn't have done it, but I was lucky enough to be, it all fell into place. So
No, definitely. I feel like that's super inspirational. Like you were hit by a tornado kind of.
it was a lot. It
Yeah.
was a lot. And you're also, as a young mother, you're also dealing with all the hormones that come with it, and the crying and the ups and the downs, and like, I want to do it. No, I don't want to do it. I can't do it. No, I can't do it. I can't do it. You kind of, it's a whirlwind of emotions, but it's exciting also. You've got that adrenaline rush. So I remember I had 3 months to kind of lose as much baby weight as possible to be able to, because those photographs, they stay online forever. So, I mean, as much as I'm like trying to like get rid of them, they're online. And I it was the unveiling of the Sotheby's office in Dubai and the DISC. And there's like the ribbon cutting and with the CEO of Sotheby's and the Minister of Culture and me. And it's like, it was there, it's there. And it was a moment that I had to be very much ready for. So 3 months postpartum was challenging, but it gave me a mission.
Yeah.
To look my best in 3 months. But yeah, so yesterday actually I was invited by the school of my son to give a class, a lesson, to teach a lesson on art. And I have to say that's one of the most rewarding feelings, to be able to stand in front of a group of children and talk to them about art and the art world and inspire them in some way to do what you want to do and do what you're passionate about doing. And it's such a great world to be part of, the art world. And I said, art is an expression of your feelings. It's a way of communicating. It's a way of sharing something to the world. And there are no boundaries. And there's so many things you can do with it. So, and they started showing these 8-year-old children started pointing out in the classroom all the artwork they had done. And it's a very amazing space to be in. And I'm very lucky.
Definitely, yeah, it's very creative. Like you get to learn about yourself and others as well at the same time from what they like.
For sure.
Yeah. And so your current title, Deputy Chairman, carries so much weight. But what does that mean kind of in the day-to-day, and how did you ultimately prepare yourself to such a role?
So the deputy chairman role, this is something I took on a year ago. So the initial role that I took was head of the UAE office. And then as my children got older, I could travel more. I could have a wider reach, and my remit could be wider across the region. So this is where the deputy chairman role came about, because my kids got older. So I could allow myself to step away a little bit out of the UAE bubble that I was in and start traveling more. So that's why we're doing more. I'm trying to do more in my trips and cover more of the wider region that involves Saudi, that involves Qatar, that involves Lebanon, everything, Bahrain, Kuwait. So this is the point of my role, is to basically grow our business in the wider region, but also the clients that are Middle Eastern, but that live abroad, live in London, live in New York and Los Angeles. So it's very much a role that will be, I'm hoping that, in this region, unfortunately or fortunately, it's very title driven. So with these big roles unlocks a lot of opportunities. So I thought it's a good thing to have a title like this, because when you want to speak to a client that's very high profile, when you have this bigger role, it unlocks a relationship. It's a way in. I couldn't rely on the CEO of Sotheby's coming to the region all the time. So in a way, it helps me to be able to access more people, and it is a higher impact. It does help. Effectively, the role of deputy chairman is very similar to what I was doing before, but on a wider scale. Rather than focus on the UAE, now my remit is to focus on the Middle East at large.
Okay, no, that makes sense. And so if someone wanted to one day step into a leadership role like yours, what is the most important lesson or piece of advice that you can share with them?
You can't step into a leadership role. You have to put in the time and the work. I mean, like I said, I've been at Sotheby's 17 years, and I've reached a milestone of being the deputy chairman of the Middle East, but it's taken time. So I would say, be patient, work hard, and try to be the best you can at what you're good at doing. There's no point forcing yourself to be something that you're not, just because you think that will get me more money and this is a higher paying job, because at the end of the day, if you're mediocre at it, there's no point, you won't excel. So it's better to focus on what your strengths are, continue in that path, in that journey. And I mean, I've been through ups and downs in this company. You know, we've been through some challenging times, and there are bumps, and then it comes down and goes up, and it, you know, you get through it. So I would say you have to try and build resilience. And if I've learned anything from being at Sotheby's for so long and going through the crisis, the time when I joined, it was like I was potentially being made redundant, and I had to really fight for my role to stay. This was in 2008, and then there was several rounds of redundancies over the years. But I've tried to keep going, and if I was lucky enough to carry on, I would try to keep going and perfect what I was doing to be able to grow in my role. So in order to get to the leadership position, you have to put in the time, you have to put in the work, and you have to do what you can do to shine. So show your best, put your best foot forward and stay in that. Like, don't try to do a million things that you think will make more money or you'll be better, you'll be good at it. And if you're not good at it, you keep trying. It's better to focus on what you know you can do.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you. And so just if we, you know, take a step back and you kind of press rewind on all of those 17 years, what is one kind of milestone or something that's marked you throughout those years?
I always think back on in 2018, so 2 years or a year into opening Sotheby's in Dubai, we were discussing with my colleagues in London which paintings we should be bringing to Dubai to show the audience in Dubai. And at the time, the Louvre had just opened in Abu Dhabi. And I was speaking to my colleagues in the Old Master department, and there was a painting that came up that was going to be auctioned in January, and they wanted to bring it to Dubai. And I thought it would be great to bring it because it was a Rubens, an Old Master painting by Rubens, and it was a portrait of Jesus. And there was an email exchange going back and forth between me and my colleagues, and they were like, well, this doesn't make sense to send this Rubens portrait of Jesus to the UAE. It's not, they won't understand it. Jesus Christ, it doesn't resonate there. And, it's more of an Islamic country. And I said, yes, but the Louvre has just opened, and, it's a universal museum, and it's all about interfaith. And they said, well, we're not sure. Anyways, the exchange went on, and finally they agreed, and they decided to send the painting to Dubai. I have to do it justice. So I had invited the curators of the Louvre, and I invited the Minister of Culture at the time, an incredible woman who's now the Minister of State, Her Excellency Noura Al-Kabi. And we did the unveiling of this painting in the Sotheby's office in Dubai. Fast forward 4 weeks or 5 weeks later, and the Louvre acquired it, and it's now hanging in their galleries. So I was so proud. That was such an amazing moment, because also I took my kids to the Louvre, and we were walking around, and I said, Mommy sold this painting. And I really feel like I was part of that. And it's great to be able to see a painting that you've sold in a museum, because you think this is going to last through time, like years and years and generations to come. It's nice to say, oh, I played a little role in that. I would say today is the most exciting part of my role, because being here in the UAE and all these beautiful museums being born and created in the next few years. So first there's the Louvre, and there's the Guggenheim, and then there's going to be the Natural History Museum, the Zayed National Museum. I mean, there's so many things coming up in the next few years. I'm very lucky that I'm in a position where I can put things forward to these museums for them to be acquired or for them to be assessed. And it's such a great feeling to know that you've played a part in that. When they get bought and acquired and they end up in the museum, you feel that's such an exciting and very fulfilling moment. So it's a great position to be in.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so I just want to focus a bit, on the private side of things versus kind of an auction. So when Sotheby's receive a piece of art, how do you decide to take it publicly or privately?
Well, often it's the seller that decides whether they want it on the public market or they want it sold privately. Sometimes they bought it from a gallery. They don't necessarily want the gallery to know that they're selling the painting. So that's a reason. Because of the timing, maybe the auction for this particular painting won't be for another 3 months and they need to sell quicker. So in which case we would do a private sale. Also the price expectations. Sometimes we price things in a more conservative way to allow people to want to bid, to kind of get the bidding going. So we price more conservatively to also encourage the bidding to start. And if it's a private sale, it's a more on the higher range of the estimate. So clients might feel more confident and comfortable selling it privately. But Sotheby's will sometimes turn it down if the private sale doesn't make sense. If we feel like it would do better at an auction, we would advise accordingly. So it really depends. There's so many factors, but we do a lot of private sales, more and more, I would say, compared to 10 or 11 years ago. Private sales wasn't a big part of our business. Now I would say bread and butter is auctions, but private sale is becoming definitely more
Okay, interesting. And in terms of, the pricing side that you were mentioning, so it's true, like in an auction, the price kind of starts low and then you want the competition from the bidders to bring it up. And then in the private sale, the dealer puts the ask price and then, the offers will come in and try to get it a bit down. In a way, does that not mean that a same piece of art can have a different price or like value depending on the means of the sale?
No, so the way we would price both, we would price it at auction and we would price it for private sale. So the Sotheby's specialists, that's what they would do, and they would price it at the level that would match the market for the artist. We don't make up the prices. We definitely cross-check it. First of all, the whole team of specialists, they all sit together and they price things together. So it's like a collaborative effort. And they check the art net and the market results for the artist to be able to price it accordingly. But when the private sale price is given, it obviously has to match the expectations of the buyer. But we don't allow a negotiation is not below a certain point. So if the client agrees to net sell, a net price, let's say they say, I won't sell for less than 10,000, then we make sure the potential buyer knows that it cannot sell for less than that amount. We do the capping.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so you work very closely with Middle Eastern client. What makes this region unique in terms of collecting behavior that you've noticed?
Such an interesting question, because actually it's very different to the other regions and to the West, I would say, because I think in the Middle East there hasn't been enough museums. So people here don't necessarily it's not in their culture to go to look at art, to go look at museums. And actually up until less than 20 years ago, there were no galleries in Dubai. There was nothing really in the art scene. Before Al Circal, before the few galleries that opened in DIFC, there really wasn't anything. So when you don't grow up with that habit of going to look at art, it's very hard to then, because it's obviously an investing asset class. So you have to be willing to put money towards it. So when it's not something that's part of your everyday or when you started young or your parents used to do it, it's very difficult to then start doing it. So it's now starting to shift. But when I came here back in 2015, I noticed collectors weren't really comfortable with buying art. They were more comfortable, and even today, with buying jewelry and handbags, expensive handbags like Hermes and Chanel, luxury cars, watches. Those were the luxury items were very much easier to convince or to sell to our clients here in the region. But buying art has taken a lot more time. And I think the shift that everyone that is involved in the art ecosystem in the Middle East, we all play a role in educating. So we have to do a lot of, rather than bringing art to the Middle East and doing a cocktail party, we want to do a talk, an educational conversation, have the specialists speak about the art and speak about the artist or about the show, the exhibition, just to be able to educate people more. So I think with time, it will change, it will shift. And the more art people get used to seeing and the younger generation grow up going to museums and going to galleries and learning about artists from their region and feeling patriotic, the more that will change. But right now, where we are today, there are definitely not enough art collectors. It's actually fewer than I would have ever imagined. But hopefully that will change.
Yeah. Okay, I wouldn't have imagined, but it kind of makes sense if they resonate more with that, then it's harder to acquire like a piece of art that, because like for me, for example, I used to go to museums whenever I would travel with my parents. Like we would do literally all of the museums in the city. So I've always loved, like art in general.
You had an affinity to it. I think there's so much to say about that. When you grow up doing something and it becomes a habit of since you were young or you saw your family doing it, it's a lot easier to resonate. It is a lot easier to relate to it. Whereas if it's something you've never grown up doing, it's very daunting to start buying art. And you can buy art, decorative pieces to decorate your home, but you will never spend $500,000 on a painting if it's something that you never grew up looking at or you never understood art. It was something that just wasn't in your habits of growing up. So I think that's why we need to do more with education and exposure to art.
And so obviously as well, buyers will treat art differently. Like some will see it as a financial asset, like only others will kind of see it as an extension of their own identity. So how do you navigate, handling those different clients?
Well, yeah, every client has a different purpose and reason for wanting to buy art. But I personally don't recommend buying art just as an investment. It's something Sotheby's, we always try to tell our clients, buy art that speaks to you, that you love, that you want to live with, that you want to look at, and that you feel passionate about. And if it's in a good investment, then great. But if you love what you buy, you'll be happy living with it, regardless of its value. So we don't recommend, and I know there are so many panel discussions and podcasts about art as an investment, and I don't tend to comment on that particular topic, but I would just definitely suggest to buy art that you love, or even that serves a purpose. If you have a big wall in your living room and you want a really amazing, iconic piece to be hanging there to add a lot of color and life to the room, then that's what you should be looking for. So it really has to suit you and something that speaks to you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I fully agree with that. And so have you ever come across a collector who was like so emotionally attached to a piece that to the point where like he simply couldn't walk away, like no matter the price?
We love passionate buyers like that. Yes, I have come across many clients like that. But no matter what the price is, usually the price comes into play. I mean, there is definitely a limit to how far they would go. I've seen people go crazy in a bidding war to acquire a painting. And I've been part of amazing records. I was in an auction where I was bidding against a colleague of mine and in London, and it was on a painting by René Magritte. It was the title of the painting was L'Empire des Lumières, and it started around 40 million and it sold for 70.
Wow.
Or something in the 70s. Yeah. And it was an 8-minute battle between me and this colleague. I wasn't buying it for myself, obviously, but I was bidding on behalf of a client. And actually, that's another moment that I remember. I will always remember in my career at Sotheby's, because I remember getting a call from the client saying that they wanted to bid on this painting. And it was a day before the auction. So I was in Dubai, and obviously the auction was in London. And I'm like, for this painting, I'm getting on a plane. I said goodbye to my children. I said to my husband, figure it out. And I'm going to bid on this painting. So I flew to London. All my colleagues were so surprised to see me, because usually I don't necessarily fly for all the auctions. If I have bids, I would pass them on to my colleague, because I had young children and I wasn't at the time able to move around so often. So I showed up, and all my colleagues like, oh, Katia, you're here. Oh, nice to see you. And I didn't say anything. I was like, good to see you too. And then they're like, oh, you bidding this evening? And I said, yes, I am. I have a client bidding on a painting, but I never said what it was. And then all of a sudden I started really strong, and really like I went all the way. So they were like, at the end of it, they were like, wow, Katia, who's your client? They got so impressed. I think they were not expecting it. And because I was very quiet about it, I think I surprised them all. I was very popular that day. They all wanted to know more about what I was doing in Dubai. So it was a fun moment. But yeah, since then, we've had more and more buyers coming out. There are some very, very strong buyers coming out of the region. You asked me a while ago, the collectors in the Middle East. There's not a lot of them. There's not like hundreds of them, but there are like, I would say 20 very strong buyers. But if you compare it to London or New York, there are like hundreds of important art collectors. And there are collectors who are in their 30s, who are buying contemporary art, emerging mid-career contemporary art. There's not enough of those clients here in Dubai, or in the Middle East. There's not enough young collectors that are buying steadily, rapidly. There are a lot of very established art collectors. I'm working on that middle market, that middle collector.
Okay. And so what kind of advice would you give those young people who are maybe a bit not afraid to do it, but like they're kind of, second guessing it, not ready to kind of take that step?
I would say start getting more acquainted with the galleries, start getting more acquainted with the artists that you like. Look at it. I mean, just start looking into it, because if you don't know what you like, then it's very hard to start somewhere. So you have to kind of get a sense of what your aesthetic is. If you're patriotic, you want to buy artists from your region, from Iran, from Lebanon, I mean, then that's fine. But I would say try to look at, there's so many artists out there, so many talent out there. So try to kind of narrow it down to, let's say, 10 or 20 artists that you really like, and then trying to see how you can start acquiring them. And also having a friend that works in the art world really helps. So then you can ask ideas, you can ask questions to those people, and then hopefully you can form a little committee of people who are your art advisors, your friends that can advise you. Actually, I have a friend of mine who started collecting in 2021 or 2022, and he's built an incredible collection since then, only in the last few years. He spent maybe $20 million on art. But he told me that what was fascinating is he said, how did your collecting journey begin? I actually interviewed him, and he said, well, I actually formed a little committee without telling these people that they were on the committee. I had one person from Gagosian Gallery, one person from an auction house, one person from I don't know where, So different fields. And he said every time I would look at a painting that I would like, I would ask them, what do you think about this painting? And I would ask them all, and I would see what they would say. And obviously he would go for what his gut would tell him at the end of the day, and what obviously he could financially afford at the time. But it helps to ask questions to specialists and professionals, because then you know, okay, it's validating. Okay, this person knows what he's talking about, so I think I should do it. If 5 people tell you you should buy a painting that you love and that you think you can afford, there's no denying that.
Yeah. That's like you taking the flight straight.
Exactly. I mean, that's what I would do. If I was starting an art collection and I knew nothing about art, I would start looking at, what do I like? What are the artists that speak to me? What is my aesthetic? And then I would start getting to know people who are in that space, whether it be, not even if you happen to have friends that are in art, great. If you don't, then like I said, walking into a gallery and getting to know that person. Gallerists are they tend to be open to meeting new prospect collectors. I mean, that's their job. Their job is to meet new people, new clients. So if you are a new potential client to them, they'll be very happy to answer any questions and give you information and share catalogs with you. And that's how you build on it. And having a few people in they're your resources at the end of the day, and they can guide you.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I think that's super interesting and important to also kind of do, because you need that advice from someone who knows the field. So I think that's a great way to kind of wrap this up. And I want to ask you 5 rapid questions, and you can give me, a one answer question just to get to know you a bit better. So what's the first artwork you ever fell in love with?
I fell in love with a Tunisian artist called Raja Issa from Selma Fariani Gallery, and I bought it at the time in 2010, I believe, and it was 4,000 euros, which at the time was a big jump for me, and it was like all my salary for 2 months. I had to put it together, and the painting is still hanging in my mother's house in my old bedroom. So it's a silhouette of a woman. And I liked it a lot. I still like it, but it's nice to see I bought something at the time that I still like today.
Yeah, that's super nice. And so what's your favorite museum anywhere in the world?
Oof, that's I have to say I'm very, very passionate about the Louvre here in Abu Dhabi. It's my favorite museum ever, because not just the collection, but also the architecture. Yes. It has such a peaceful, you walk in and your energy changes, and it's such a peaceful feeling, and it's so stunning. And it's such a happy place to be in. The other day I was there with my colleagues, and the CEO of Sotheby's was over, and 15 of my colleagues, and they did a tour of the galleries, and I've seen the galleries maybe 150 times. So I let them do the tour, and I sat outside and I just had a coffee, and they sat outside in the museum. The light and the water and just the whole scenery of it, just sitting under the dome, is just something very special. So definitely the Louvre, not just for the collection, but also for just the sheer beauty of the architecture of the building.
I
It's
agree.
my favorite museum.
Yeah,
by far.
Okay, so one artist, dead or alive, that you'd love to have coffee with?
Ooh, I would love to have coffee with Fernando Botero. I really adore, I know it's a polarizing opinion, because some love it and some don't care so much for it, but I'm lucky enough to know his son, and he's such a gentleman, and I really, really love his paintings, and I've always liked Botero's paintings, and I just love the humor and the satirical way he paints. And I'm sad that I'd never got to meet him, and he passed away a couple of years ago, but I would have loved to meet him.
And if you could own any piece of art in the world, which one would it be?
I would have to say a Magritte. I fell in love with the painting that I was bidding on, and L'Empire des Lumières and Magritte. And honestly, any impressionist art I would love to own. Monet would be amazing. Matisse would be amazing. I love also Tamara Lempicka. I really like Art Deco, and Tamara Lempicka is an artist that I love. But I would say Magritte or a Monet would be my 2 favorites.
I feel like I know then the answer to my final question, which is, if your life were a painting, which artist would have painted it?
If my life were a painting, which artist would... Oh, that's a good question. Let me think about that. My life is... I have to think about that for a second. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, maybe Matisse. Matisse
Okay.
would do a nice painting of my hectic life, but make it beautiful somehow.
Yeah. Okay, I love that. I love Matisse as well.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. I have
Thank you,
one
Karina.
final closing question, that I ask all of my guests to round up the episode. So if you were today to have a conversation with your 18-year-old self, what would you tell her?
I would tell her to be very grateful for every day that comes and not focus on what you don't have and focus on what you do have, because people tend to get caught up in being greedy. And I would say to just be grateful for everything that I've been lucky to. Things have fallen into place, and there are times that I've thought, oh my God, why me? Why me? Everyone has these moments. But actually, somehow the universe has weird ways of showing you that things work out for the best. So at the time, I think things went wrong, and I would think it's the end of the world and it's so dramatic. But actually, you have to have faith that things will turn around and will work out for the better. So be patient, be grateful for what you do have. Don't focus on what you don't have. And yeah, just try to be optimistic and have a good daily routine. I'm a big fan of having a good daily routine. All my podcasts that I've been listening to is, wake up and look at the morning light and, have a moment of gratitude and take your time, go for a walk, have that connection with nature. At night, don't look at your phone. All these things I think help you with your mental health and help you refill your cup and stay grounded. And I think at 18, I wasn't good at that. And I think today I'm very good at that. And I think it's important to, when you feel overwhelmed, to take a step back, take a deep breath and just focus on the positive. And I think in today's world, people are getting carried away with all the negative things, but things can work out.
Okay, perfect. I love that.
Thank
you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. It was great to speak to you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to The Seat of the Muse, and I'm so grateful you chose to spend this time with me. If something stirred you today, a thought, a feeling, a question, I'd love for you to subscribe and follow on your favorite platform, leave a review, and even share this episode with a friend. Your support truly fuels this space and helps invite more voices to sit down with me. Until next time, stay curious.